The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This story from the world of campaign and political finance made some headlines in the last 24 hours. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker said that he is no longer going to accept campaign donations from political action committees that have ties to for-profit corporations. And he's been sort of on the map as maybe thinking about running for president in 2020. And now he becomes one of 6 senators who are saying they are also not going to accept PAC donations from PACs that have ties to for-profit companies. Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts is one of them. New York's Kirsten Gillibrand, Bernie Sanders has said the same thing, all sort of possible 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. Candidates, I guess I'm looking for another word. Potential candidates, yeah. And so, okay, I mean, I have mixed feelings about this. Obviously, my feelings aren't mixed in that this is good. The thing is, it's also, I mean, you're not going to accept donations from PACs with known ties to for-profit companies. That's such a very specific wording. You could be accepting money from PACs that get money from for-profit companies, but because of how that money is being funneled in, it's not known to be money from for-profit companies. Like, it's not clear exactly where the money is coming from, period. There's a lot of workarounds here, and I don't want to belittle it. Like, I think this is good. This is going in the direction of the model that I think should be the model of campaign finance. But it's a lot of optics working here as well.
So you think they're exposing themselves perhaps as hypocrites if they end up taking PAC money one way or another?
I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm saying that the value of making this pronouncement is partially real and partially just optics because of the way in which a lot of these PACs work and PAC law in the United States.
Many of these Democrats, even the corporate establishment ones, were saying that we're against the Citizens United decision, and yet they would run for office and still accept money from corporate PACs, right?
That's fair. Okay, but
that's a more simple contradiction, I think.
Let's talk about that, though, because so this is an ongoing debate, right? Which is, okay, hey, we finally found someone who says, I want to change the way politics is financed. But they're accepting money from all the same places as everybody else. Simple defense, though, is, listen, they're not in decision-making positions yet. They need to use the system we have now in order to get into power. And then once they get in, they'll start trying to change the system or whatever. But then they obviously don't because there's so much money.
They never do it.
So I don't know. I mean, it's like there is a defense to that. There's a general position of you've got to work as best you can within the system that we have. I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that type of thing. But and I don't want to just be a downer. Like, hey, this is great. We've now got this group of senators that says they're not going to accept PAC money from known corporate PACs. That's good. It's just there's so many other PACs that have money coming from individuals whose money is coming from whatever corporation they work for anyway, or anonymous contributions, whatever. I mean, you know how it all works.
I think it's more interesting if a congressman who's not very well known nationally makes this statement, because by and large, whoever raises the most money in those smaller races tends to win.
Yeah.
But all these people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and then Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker, they have big name recognition, and even if they raise less money than their opponent, they still have a good shot at winning, especially because they are in safe Democratic strongholds.
Combined just in general with the power of incumbency, right? So you can also make the case that these are safer individuals to do it, but I don't know. It's good. We should be glad that it's good to the extent that it's good. And beyond that, okay, I mean, you know, these are professional politicians and establishment for the most part, aside from their political views, they are part of the status quo of American politics.
Yeah, and it's the establishment Democrats taking on positions that I think more of the public and certainly more of the progressive wing of the party have pushed them to. Like, for example, supporting universal health care, that's becoming more part of the mainstream Democratic Party.
Sure.
And now with campaign finance reform, I think it's becoming a must for them.
And by the way, I'm not saying Bernie is a corporate Democrat. I don't want people to write in and say that that's what I was saying. I'm not saying that. There was a very angry woman who was kicked off of a flight on Endeavor Air. I've heard of Endeavor Air, but I don't really know exactly what it is. I don't remember if Endeavor is one of the regionals that does the short trips for one of the legacy carriers. Like, is Endeavor part of, not part of, but is Endeavor the regional carrier for like Delta or United? I don't really remember. But in any case, a woman on an Endeavor Air flight didn't want to sit next to a Rochester mom who had a crying baby with her. This is Marissa Rundell, who was flying from JFK to Syracuse a few days ago. She said that she was insulted by the blonde, potty-mouthed woman. The lady thought she was going to be rude to me and Mason. Now she had no way home today. And she also posted video to Facebook with part of the incident. Oh, it is. So it is Delta. Delta is
okay, good.
Endeavor Air is
we
the
found it out.
carrier for Delta.
That's great.
Delta said, yeah, we kicked off the woman who was refusing to sit next to the baby. And listen, I have almost universally on flights, I'm sitting in front of or next to someone kicking my seat or a crying baby. You can't do much about it, right? You're not violating any rules if your kid is crying. It's really annoying and I can't stand it. But I'm not going to start throwing going on a tirade because of that. Obviously, I'm going to be the one kicked off if I do that. Like, what did the woman expect the airline to do about a crying baby?
There certainly is some poetic justice in this woman being kicked off the plane, especially because she was even calling out the flight attendant.
Yeah.
She asked for her name and then said, well, you may not have a job in the morning.
Right.
It turns out, if this video goes viral, it could be this woman who's complaining that doesn't have a job.
Yeah, why would the flight attendant be fired? I've actually witnessed, I was recently, I generally try to avoid Southwest only because it's sort of like a romper room on the plane. And unless they board by number, and unless you're boarding like in the first 30, I find, you end up in like the most chaotic situations. And often flying out of Boston, it's not the cheapest, nor the most convenient, nor anything. So anyway, I generally try to avoid Southwest, although my experiences on Southwest haven't been particularly bad. The last time I was on a Southwest flight was, I think, coming back from the Las Vegas conference I go to, maybe a year ago. It was maybe like 2 times ago, or maybe even 3 times ago.
So they travel northeast then?
I'm sorry?
They don't just travel Southwest.
They travel all over the United States, absolutely. Geographically ambiguous name for Southwest Airlines. And you know how they always say, don't line up for the bathroom at the front of the plane? If you need to line up, go to the back galley.
Okay.
Because you don't want, I guess, like near the cockpit, they just don't want people lining up for that forward bathroom. And I was lucky enough because I had like a boarding position of like 15. I was sitting in like the second row. So as soon as there was a line of like 2 people, it was right next to me. The guy in the first row got up to use the bathroom. And then a woman came up and said, oh, they said not to stand in the aisle.
Right.
So I'm going to just temporarily sit in the seat that's vacated by a guy,
by that guy
who's in the bathroom.
Yep.
Not a crazy thing to do. Reasonable thing to do. The guy comes out of the bathroom and sees someone in his seat and says to the woman, oh, that's my seat. And the woman becomes immediately furious, like she's been incredibly disrespected. And she says, I was told by the flight attendants not to block the aisle, so I was in your, like a completely out of place reaction. Like the guy was just saying, oh, you're in my seat. And
that's weird, because she did the rational thing, so you'd think that she would be rational,
she was a rational
once confronted.
Person. That's exactly right, but she wasn't.
And he, of course, didn't know what was going on.
And then it started to escalate, and a flight attendant came over and said, hey, what's going on here? And the guy just goes, oh, I was just letting this woman know she was in my seat. I was in the bathroom. And the woman and the flight attendant says, oh, please don't sit in other people's seats. Which, okay, listen. She was sitting there to not block the aisle, which is what the flight attendants want. The flight attendant didn't necessarily have to say that. The woman started saying, I am going to have you fired. She said, I am going to be contacting Southwest Airlines, and I am going to have you fired because you were so rude and blah, 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 blah. Listen, maybe it wasn't handled the best way by the flight attendant who said, please don't sit in other people's seats at all. But to start saying you're going to be firing a flight attendant for merely stating the policy is don't sit in other people's seats, where does the entitlement come from? I can't even imagine a situation where I would start yelling at someone that I'm going to get them fired from their job.
Yeah, so the man who, I don't know, I want to say confronted the woman, but who
pointed out that it was a seat.
Yeah, to him I would just calmly explain the scenario. I was waiting in line for the bathroom, and now that you're out, I can take it. And then once the flight attendant comes over and makes that remark to me, I would probably just do some smarmy comment and brush it off.
Yeah, you don't have to escalate in this way.
Don't escalate.
It was crazy. Anyway, it was in the middle of a flight. Nobody got tossed off, but this is probably the right thing. I can't stand crying kids on planes,
I know.
But what are you going to do?
I really got to say, like, unless there's some absolute need to, please don't bring your baby on the plane. Like, does the baby really have to travel in its first year or two of life?
I think that that's crazy, though. Do you think parents say, just for the hell of it, I don't need to do this, but just for fun, I'm going to bring my baby on a plane? No, of course not. Like, everyone I know has little kids and they bring them on a plane. They're doing it because they've got to go somewhere.
Maybe they're just going on vacation. You know, they're going to Disney World or something.
They're entitled to a vacation.
They're entitled. Yeah, I don't think it should be illegal. But I just think that if I was a parent and I had a screaming kid,
you would try to avoid bringing them on.
Yeah,
what if they're only screaming when they're on the plane? So you don't know it's a screaming kid ahead of time.
So wait until the baby's like 2 or 3 years old and can calmly behave himself.
I'm not endorsing what Pat is saying right now. Just so I don't send the emails to him about it. Okay, a veteran Colorado teacher is now facing criminal charges of child abuse because she allegedly forced a student to stand during the Pledge of Allegiance. The shocking part is that some schools are still saying the Pledge of Allegiance. That's really the disturbing part of this. Yeah, well, I know, but I thought that now it was being phased out. In any case, Karen Smith teaches physical education at Angevine Middle School in Boulder, Colorado. She forced the student to stand for the pledge by lifting him to his feet by his jacket and removing him from the classroom, according to a report by the Denver Channel citing local police. Cops were called to the school. The woman was formally charged in connection with this because you're not allowed to grab the kids in this way, right? Yeah. Don't we know this at this point? And by the way, why do you care if the kid stands during the Pledge of Allegiance? I know that it's one of these things where some people are triggered by someone disrespecting the flag by not standing. I don't think we should even be saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, the teacher was certainly in the wrong, and we can certainly talk about that. But I don't think it warranted her being, I don't know if she was arrested, but facing any criminal charges.
It is a physical assault on the kid to grab a kid by his jacket, stand him up, and then drag him out of the classroom. Like, you can't allow that. That's a crime. He's going to be fine. But that is still, you're not allowed to do that unless it's, I guess in some states they allow corporal punishment. Parents can delegate to teachers the permission to physically punish the kids. In some states, that's legal, and it might only be in private schools. In some other states, it's not legal in Colorado. Yeah. So this is a crime.
This gym teacher is an older woman. She went to school at a different time where this was commonplace, not only to pick up someone by their jacket, but to do much worse things to them.
Yeah.
So I think it stands to reason that there should be some transition, right? Like, she shouldn't be arrested for this, especially because it's not like she's beating the kid.
The transition is when the school notifies you can't do this to kids. That's the transition. I think
she should be notified of that, but not face criminal charges.
It's the note. She already should have known that because I don't think that's like saying, hey, listen, I mean, you used to be able to smoke on planes. Like, just allow me to do it because it's what I'm used to. This is how I grew up. I mean, it's a bad analogy, but I don't think that that's a defense. I just don't think it's a defense.
Yeah.
If you physically do something that is a crime, then it's a crime. And of course, these are allegations. Nothing has been proven at this time. I don't like anything about it. And if charges are warranted, I'm not saying you throw this woman in prison or jail or something like that. I'm not saying that.
She's facing abuse charges.
If that is what she did, if the evidence warrants that, then that seems to be appropriate for the police to file, and then it can be up to the prosecutor to go from there.
You gotta love how the school's policy is that you don't have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, because of course you don't. That's freedom of speech, and that's freedom of expression right there. And the fact that she got so triggered and had to respond in this way really tells you something about her.
Well, we saw this with the flag national anthem protests in football, right? Which is the same people that criticize the left for getting so easily triggered. They were so triggered by a couple football players saying, I'm going to be off the field or kneeling during it. That is very, very thin-skinned. And he or she who lives in a glass house should not throw stones. Or the pot should not call the kettle black.
Yes.
Or, I don't know, insert whatever similar analogy you want.
So you didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance when you were growing up?
No, we did when I was in elementary school.
Ah.
But by the time I even got to middle school and high school, it was done.
Yeah, I mean, we were still doing it in high school, and everyone
you went to a much more conservative school.
I did, yeah. And everyone would just stand up and do it. No one really cared.
Yeah.
People didn't really cover their hands with their hearts or whatever, but it just became part of the routine.
Yeah.
And I remember one time there was a teacher who was a Jehovah's Witness, and she was observing the class all standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I remember her just sitting there and looking at us as if we were all sheep, like we were all buying into this nonsense. And it was quite a thing to watch, but it was actually kind of like a reverse scenario of what happened in this story.
Rare moment where I would have been on board with the point of view of a Jehovah's Witness, which is not a common thing.
Yeah, she was doing it, of course, for religious reasons, not because she thought that the whole thing was stupid.
Jingoistic nonsense.
Right.
All right, Pledge of Allegiance. Let's keep pushing it out of schools. I think that's a good goal to have. That's it for today's bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.